Welcome to Mechanical Advantage Garage. I'm Kerry, and for those who are new to the channel, or for those who don't really pay attention or haven't met me in person, I am not a small motorcycle rider. I'm roughly 6'4" and 7/8" or 6'5", depending on the shoes I wear. And I ride a lot of motorcycles, but I don't fit on a lot of motorcycles. So behind me is a 2023 Moto Guzzi V7 Special, 850cc motorcycle, right? Beautiful bike. This one comes courtesy of our friends at Throttle Company and Moto Guzzi of Columbus, same place. Throttle's their vintage brand, Moto Guzzi's their new bikes. They also do Royal Enfield, so they're also Royal Enfield of Columbus. Nice folks down there, but so I have this one here, and the problem is, well, I don't really fit. Most of the bikes I ride, I don't like big Harleys because, to tell you the truth, Harley cockpits are not really made for tall riders. They have higher than usual foot controls. They have lower than usual seats. They actually are kind of cramped. Indians, surprisingly enough, fit a lot better, but I'm just not a cruiser guy. And I'm not a sport bike guy either, even though I've ridden sport bikes. I'm more of an all-around kind of motorcycle guy. Most of the motorcycles I ride are vintage. Things like my 1974 Ironhead Sportster sitting there, or my Honda 750, or my BMW R80. But all my bikes start at like 30 years old or older, except for the Ducati, but that's a different story. So with that comes a certain amount of unreliability. But this has the riding position and features of a vintage bike, but it's new. It's fuel injected. I can put E10 in it, ethanolated fuel in it, and not have to worry about blowing out carb seals. So when I found out that Moto Guzzi makes a touring seat for these that's meant to accommodate bigger and taller riders, I figure let's check it out, and it would probably make good content for the channel because I don't see a lot of content on these besides rider reviews where somebody just rides one and says, oh, this is pretty nice. But also, I definitely don't see a lot of content for big and taller riders, which I am one. So let's dive into this. So believe it or not, the seats on these are fairly easy to remove. You just gotta find what you did with the key. Haha. And there's a key switch right here. You turn it back, the seat pops off, and then we can take a look. So what I have here are the two seats side by side. This seat right here on the left with the ribbing and the nice grain pattern. This is the stock seat on the Moto Guzzi. This is what the bike was delivered with, and it's fine. It's a beautiful looking seat. I'm not thrilled with it because if you look at the profile, it's fairly thin, right? On the right here, this is the Moto Guzzi big and tall accessory seat, the touring seat. I forget what the actual name for it is, but it's got an okay grain to it. It's not as nice as the stock seat is. It does have this interesting strap, which makes it a little vintage. Doesn't have the ribbing, which is unfortunate. This actually looks more like leather than the vinyl seat over here. This feels better, but this actually does feel like leather. But what's nice about these is, whereas this feels, fairly squishy, this has a gel pad in it, right? It's a really big gel pad too, and it goes all the way back to the backseat passenger too, right? So the whole gel top is kind of nice, and it has less of a bump here, so it's more of a flatter seat. Side by side, you can see this is a much thicker seat. Here, let's just put them on top of each other. Yeah, you can see here that this is a much thicker seat than what came stock. So if you're like a 5'7" to, I'd say about 5'11", 6 feet, this would probably do for you. If you're 6'1" and up, this is the way to go, right? So let's look at them on the bike. Well, here you can see the stock seat on it. And yeah, that is a low seat height. I don't know what to tell you, man. It's not a great feeling to be on it for too long. It's not terrible, but I end up sitting with my butt like back here in the passenger section because of my legs. So here, let me show you. Well, here you can see this looks like kind of a small bike for me, but it is not really. I mean, it's 850 cc's, so it'll pull. But when I put my legs up on it, you can really see like this is a cramped cockpit here. Let me get my other leg up while we're on the side stand. Right, so this feels kind of cramped. I end up sitting back here, but then I feel unbalanced because it feels like there's a lot more bike in front of me than there is behind me. You know, so right about here is okay. But what I'm getting is, I'm getting kind of an extreme angle right here in my thigh and pelvis, and then right here in the knees as well. And also at the foot to work the controls, my foot is kind of my ankle's at kind of an extreme angle. So let's put the big seat on. Oh, right away, this is much better. I can feel my legs are much easier to get to the pegs. This is a less extreme angle. This is a less extreme angle. And I can actually work the controls a little bit better. You know, even with both feet on the pegs, you know, I'm right where I want to be on this bike. There's still plenty of room behind me for a passenger. It just feels all around really good. So let's go take this for a spin and we'll give it like a good torture test, maybe like an hour's worth of riding, and see how it feels. So here's something that hardly ever gets talked about with big riders on smaller-ish bikes, and that is your knee angle. So as a big rider with a gut, it's real easy for my legs to like splay out like this. But it's not comfortable, especially in the wind, because you get the wind pushing on your knees. So the shorter the peg distance is from the seat, the more likely your knee is to splay out like this. The longer it is, the easier it is to keep them tucked in, especially here behind the cylinders. On this bike with the taller seat, it's a lot easier to hold this in. I don't have to use a lot of energy to hold my legs to the tank. Whereas, you know, with the stock seat on, when I first rode this bike home, like the tendency to splay my legs out was very great. So that's, you know, something else that is noticeable from the taller seat. Just to show you something real quick, I have now put 142 continuous miles on this without stopping. And I gotta say, it's pretty comfortable. I am enjoying it quite a bit. One other big concession for tall riders is this did come with the regular stock mirrors, but they're kind of low, and all they would show me is my shoulders. So there is a Guzzi model that has these bar end mirrors. I forget which one. It was a couple years ago, but these are actually a part. There's a part for them in the Moto Guzzi catalog. These are actually Moto Guzzi factory mirrors. They're not an accessory aftermarket mirror. And you know, they have you can see they have the E4 rating right here, like and DOT rating on the bottom. But they're excellent. I gotta tell you, there's almost no vibration in them. I can see clearly behind me. And the only part of my body that I see are like a tiny sliver of my elbows in the corner. So it's an excellent tall person upgrade if you're gonna ride one of these bikes. In case you're wondering how much fuel a V7 actually holds, this one just took 4 gallons even, and went, let's see here, 151 miles on that, so not too shabby. So I'm here in Moto Guzzi Columbus's showroom, because if we're talking about a new V7, we might as well talk about all the other seats that are on these bikes, especially if you're a taller rider. So first up is this new Corsa edition. It's a 2024 model, and it has its own unique sort of a racer style seat, cafe racer style seat, with this big hump here. Even though it still accommodates a passenger and has a strap, there's not a lot of room here for a passenger. I don't think these are meant for long hauls, but it is a much more scooped out design. Interestingly enough, I think this is all the same height as all the others. And you can see, you know, all the different seat styles for the same bike. But this one, you know, is unique in its shape. It looks great, but for a taller rider, it's not that much more comfortable. Actually, it's less comfortable. The Stones have a really interesting seat because it has this Alcantara pad here, and then the ribbing is here, whereas mine is the reverse of that. The ribbing is here and there's no Alcantara. This is just a flat pad, but it is the same shape. It is that thin seat. And I think the reason why they made the touring seat, like the big touring seat, the way it is so it'll fit on any one of these models here. Here's the 2024 10. This is a special edition. You have the ribbing and Alcantara on the Alcantara, whatever you want to call it. I'm mispronouncing it. On the front seating area, standard vinyl on the back. Nice stitching, but again, not a very tall seat. And then here's my bike in 2 different color schemes, and you can see there really isn't that much difference, you know, other than the Alcantara on this one and the strap. They're really just the same shape. So one thing I do wish is they made rear sets for these. They did make rear sets for the earlier models, but these later ones that are stress member frames now, they do not. So it's a shame. We're gonna have to figure something out. I could stand with the pegs being slightly further back. The passenger pegs are too high to use as rear sets from the riding position. It's just entirely too uncomfortable. Here are those mirror stalks I was talking about. Yeah, if you're a tall rider, the only thing they show you is your shoulders here. Let me demonstrate. Now we'll get on this bike. Okay. And Let's adjust this so you can actually see behind. Okay, so this is adjusted for me to see traffic behind me. This is all the way up, it's not going any further. And yeah, what you're seeing right now is, that's most of my shoulder right there, the green, you know. This side, let's do the same here. We can push it out. Yeah, here. This is what fills up about a quarter of the mirror from my eyesight, right about here. So, not great. That's why I preferred the bar end mirrors. So it looks like the Corsa has them as well as the 10, which is a nice feature. It means that you can order them out of the Guzzi parts catalog. You don't have to buy aftermarket. So if we're going to talk about the V7 for a second, especially as a potential beginner bike for haulage riders or a daily commuter bike, I'm going to talk about my experience with the modern competitors that it has in the marketplace, but also, you know, similar bikes that I own or have owned to the layout. So I did own a 79 Le Mans 2, a CX100 that was dressed as a Le Mans 1. Didn't get a chance to ride that one, actually. I bought it broken, I sold it broken. But I have ridden several of the old big block Guzzis, and they are very fun as vintage bikes. They are wonderful. They are not these. These are the small block Guzzi architecture. You can see actually it's the Lino Tanti small block frame. The big block frames, this down side cover piece would come to a point at the swing arm, right? But on the small blocks, they don't. They just come down in this like disconnected piece, and the swing arm is this like bridge, you know, built affair. It's just overbuilt. But this Lino Tanti small block frame started in the 1970s as the V35 and the V50, so the 350 and 500cc bikes. And now they've taken them all the way out to 850 and 65 horsepower. So, similar bikes that I've owned. I still have my 1986 BMW R80 RT, which is an 800cc shaft drive motorcycle that is horizontally opposed. And I like it, but it is an old bike. It delivers a different riding experience. It does, because it's an airhead, it feels more agricultural. It's closer to how the old Guzzis feel than the modern ones. This is a very smooth bike by comparison. That old Beamer is, you know, you can feel it thumping away underneath you. That said, you know, old Beamers, especially airheads, are still fairly smooth bikes. The problem with them is that they're old, and the cost of servicing one and buying parts for one is enormously expensive for what they are, right? So you buy a $2,500 bike, and then in the case of mine, which is a mono lever, a replacement rear shock, just the one shock, because it is a single shock, is $1,100. So half the price of the bike is a service item. So it doesn't make sense, right? The other bike I've owned that was 800 cc's was a 82 GS 850 GL, which was the big cruiser inline four-cylinder 850cc shaft drive Suzuki. Power delivery was different. It's just a big UJM, you know, super smooth, but a lot of shaft jacking in that chassis. These have almost none. It's actually quite nice that when you get on it, it feels very smooth and it pulls away very nicely. The Beamer with its worn out shock is starting to exhibit some shaft jacking, but for the most part doesn't exhibit it too much. You know, and in terms of horsepower and torque delivery, the BMW's down compared to this, but not by much. But it delivers it in a different way. It's torquier down low, whereas this, you know, comes on the cam probably around 3,000, 3,500, and then starts pulling all the way to redline, which is nice. So the other bikes that are competitors for this are the Triumph T100 and the older Harley Sportsters, I guess, if you can still find used new ones around, some leftover Evo Sportsters that are still around. So I had a 2008, and I will tell you as a tall rider, just stay away from Harley Sportsters in general. I love them. I love the Ironheads. I love all the older bikes, but, you know, and I do love the Evo Sportsters, but you need to, if you're over 6 feet, you need forward controls on them, and it's an awkward riding position if you're not used to riding with forward controls. You know, your legs are out in front of you, even though it feels more like you're sitting in, you know, kind of a semi-reclining chair. It's not as bad as like a big twin where you're on a Barker Lounger. It's a little more upright with a Sportster with forwards, but it's just not. You know, if you're looking for a standard riding position, you want to feel bike control and you want to be able to like stand up on the pegs. You know, that's not the bike, right? Power delivery is great on a Sportster. It's all torque, it's all down low. They're great. They pull away from traffic lights like nobody's business. And they sit on the highway at 80 miles an hour and it's fine. You're not going to do 120 on an old Sportster. On a new one, you know, all bets are off. But new ones are $16,000, whereas, you know, mine, the leftovers that they have here, right there, they're at $9,300, I think, out the door. And the brand new ones, like this special edition, is at $12,000. So even still, it's much cheaper, like than a base modern Sportster. The other bike, and it's much closer, is the T100. And I think the T100s are comparably priced, but they have less horsepower. And up until recently, they only had 5 speeds, whereas these have 6 speeds. Yes, it's easier to get parts for a Triumph if you don't live near a Guzzi dealership. You know, I don't know what to tell you about parts and service because I'm preferential to have new bikes serviced by dealers. The Triumph, you know, it's a lot easier to find dealers. And, you know, in terms of fit and finish, they're about the same. I'm not a fan of this like matte finish that they do on the Stones. Although that matte green that was in the back, where was it? I don't know, the one I was sitting on before. That matte green is very pretty. But, yeah, like this is gorgeous. The slate gray on the one I'm riding is phenomenally beautiful. But, you know, Triumph has more interesting colors, more interesting color schemes. Feels more retro, in a sense. Is not faster, is not any more comfortable. And in fact, I'm pretty sure they don't have a factory tall rider seat that you can order through the parts department. I think you have to go aftermarket on those to get a taller seat and to get a riding position that's more amenable to taller riders. So yeah, it's an interesting setup, but you know, Triumphs are, people like them, they're nostalgic for them. I think the Guzzi is a better value. I think the Guzzi is slightly cheaper. It gives up 50 cc's, but it makes more horsepower and more torque and has an extra gear. The Triumph is a little torqueier. They sound about the same when you open up the pipe, so it doesn't really matter in terms of the sound and visceral experience. I just like, you know, the Guzzi platform. I think it's, you know, unique in the sense that you have these cylinders just hanging out here in the breeze versus a parallel twin, which is thump, 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 you know. Don't get me wrong, British motorcycles are parallel twins and they are great. But yeah, this is truly a unique experience. So anyway, if you're a taller rider, hopefully this video has helped you consider the V7 as a possible commuter bike, get around town bike, weekend fun bike, whatever you want to call, where you don't need a sport bike, you don't need a cruiser. You want just a standard vintage bike feel, but something that starts every time and goes everywhere you need it. But yeah, hit me out in the comments if you like anything, if you don't like anything, and hit like, hit subscribe, and I will see you next episode.